everyone, Carl here. We're gonna get started on part 2 of the painting of the sunflowers and lily in the mason jar. In case you've forgotten what it looks like, this is it. Up to this point in part 1 of the video, we got to here doing our very basic biggest washes. The yellow flowers, the blue of the vase, the blue of the reflection out into the shadow, and a loose wash for the shadow. We're gonna take off from here and do some of the darks, establish the green shapes, and establish a little bit more on the flowers. There'll probably be another part to this video early next week, but for now, we'll probably do about an hour's worth of work, hour and a half. So get yourself a cup of coffee, get your paints out, get them ready, and let's get to it. Okay, so here is the finished demo piece that I started from. I also have on the board my photograph to scale with the grid that I used. I didn't bother to put the grid down on my paper, but I do print them out for my students in case they want to work from a grid. Grids are great for getting your eye-hand coordination dialed in. At some point, you won't need them anymore. You'll be able to draw more freely, but it takes time. The top picture is an AI-generated quote-unquote watercolor done in Photoshop of the original photo, just to kind of remind me of possibilities of shapes and how loose I can get. This painting that I did the reference on is much more representative and more natural. But there's a lot of stuff I like about that. So especially, I was definitely enticed by the glow. It's a little bit more pronounced. So I'm keeping that up there in my line of sight just to keep me thinking about it. We're gonna start. If we look at where we left off in video 1, we're going to start to build the first layer of the greens, which will help define the shapes of the sunflowers and the lily. We'll start to bring in the shapes of the greens coming down that I have simplified greatly, and I think it makes it very effective. We'll put the water level in. We'll put the darker green of the jar at the bottom. So that's what we're going to work on. We'll also start to define some of the inner parts of the sunflowers. And then what will probably be part 3, we'll work on the lily and the remaining flowers and darkening up the greens, as well as potentially darkening up the shadow side. So I figure this is going to be a 3-video painting lesson for my live students who meet at Mounts Botanical Garden. This is to help you for next week because I will be away, which we mentioned yesterday in class. For my fans who are painting along with me on the internet, this will be a 3-parter. It's a little bit longer than normal, but I think there's a lot to be learned from this still life. And my beginner classes have been doing a lot of still lifes lately and working on 1 or 2 pieces in a still life and getting the lessons of how watercolor works. Because once you get what's happening, which is you start with your lightest and your biggest shapes and try to make these big connected shapes. And then you come in with your next level of darks. And in the case of the yellow, I use that as a mother color for everything up there, and the blue of the mason jar or the atlas jar for the mother color of everything that's in here, because it is in everything that happens there. It's about, the next part is getting more specific, and then more specific after that. Really, if you can see it as stages and break it down in your mind, it becomes much easier to grapple with the chaos of the painting and how detailed it may look in the end, when in reality it's just big light shapes start to get darker, start to get more specific, and you do that 3 or 4 times, and the painting emerges almost like watching a photograph develop in a tray of developer. So if you did a time lapse of this whole thing, it might kind of look that same way. So let's get some paint moving. All right. What we're going to do is I'm going to mix up a green, and I'm going to start with sap green on my palette. And I have 2 large water buckets. You may not see them in the video. You see one of them. One's for dirty water, one's for clean water for mixing. And I get as far as I can before I lose my mind and start to put the clean brush in the dirty water and vice versa. But I try as long as I can to try and keep them separate. So I have a Viridian on my palette, and I have a sap green, so a warm green and a cool green, just to keep things, anytime you do these large shapes, like think about the large yellow shapes, transitioning warms to cools, even if it's made up as you're going along, it's okay. And it will help you later on have some variety in what you're doing. The other color I can put down on my palette to help darken these colors if I want to is grab a little purple and put it on somewhere else on my palette. It's not a good idea to mix Diox purple directly into your sap green because it's so strong. It'll overpower everything, but it's a nice color to have ready to darken up your greens. All right, let's start to pull out some of these green shapes, shall we? And I'm gonna pull some stuff closer to me. Oops, is that okay? My painting was a little bit far away from me. There, that'll work. Okay, I don't have to stretch as far. I do have my head craned underneath the camera, but that's all you can do. And we can use these green shapes to help us create the shapes of the sunflowers. And if this looks a little funny here, it's because I put some masking fluid in there where that leaf that's coming forward bends towards us. So that'll come off later and leave us with some white paper that I can soften it and bend it a little bit to get it to look like the leaf is kind of cascading. This leaf back here actually has much more yellow in it. So I took some Dairy Lied yellow, which is almost orange. It's a warm yellow. And I'm gonna add some of that sap green to it. It ends up making a lighter yellow. You could use lemon yellow if you wanted. It's kind of a green gold by the time I finish mixing it all together. Gives us a little variety here. Okay. And then take a little Viridian back here. We're not doing anything super specific yet. I'm just looking at the photo and looking where I have green leaves compared to where I have the yellow and putting them in and just varying the color on them. The color and the lightness and darkness just a little bit. But you see that the colors, or the shapes rather, of our lily and our sunflowers are starting to emerge. I didn't draw anything over here leaves wise. I'm just going to start to make a mass shape underneath this sunflower. That basically comes down to here, just over the lip of the jar, like that. And this is the lightest version of our green. There's going to be a lot of layers of darkening that happen in here. So all we're trying to do right this moment is get our shapes to be effective. And again, here we've got these like dandelion things that have greenery. And these come right to the flower of the lily, so we can make that all one big shape connected here behind the lily, like that. And there. And all of this, we can start with that light yellow green. It'll get darker as it goes. We'll make some variety between the different ones, but we'll start this as one big shape behind the top lily petal. A tiny bit of spattering in here now, just at the outer edges. I'll come back with my paper towel and blot some of it if it got too strong or too far. And then this is like, I don't know, pickerel or some sort of goldenrod or some sort of weedy kind of thing. It's a wildflower. I'm sure it's got a name. I'm just giving it some brush marks to give it some shape. Starting, and it's a green gold in the photograph. And it can come outside the shape of the yellow. Almost a stamping pattern with my brush, but that starts to establish that. All right. And that can be the first layer of the work on the greens. Looks to me like this actually comes out and goes like that. So I'm going to add a little bit more here, right to the end of the shadow. It comes up on the flower like that. Okay, so we'll let that green stuff dry. I'm gonna just take a second I dried out my brush, and wherever that bead is collected, if it looks like it might run on me while I'm working, I can just tamp it out. Good, I think that's come along rather nicely. Now, put a little puddle of cobalt teal onto my palette and added some neutral tint and just a hair of that yellowy green mixture that I made. And just running it across the top of that's gonna be my water line. Okay, just like that. Now we know where the water is. And then we can also use that same mixture and get in here at the bottom. I put a little masking fluid in here when we first started, but I can also leave a few holes. There's some letters under there that you can't read, but they have a indistinct but definitely their sort of quality. And then I'm dropping wet into here. This is a little bit darker. Just making a fine line here at the tip of my brush. This is a number 12. This is a Rosemary and Company. I think they're synthetic watercolor brushes. I think this is called a Snowdrift or a Snowdrop. They're white when you get them. But boy, do they keep their points, and they hold a lot of water. They're my most favorite watercolor brushes for the money. Even with the shipping from England, they're still of magnificent value. Same thing with a little bit darker. I can go along the back of there and along just under where we put in that color on both sides of here. And then clean out our brush and re-wet it, take some of the water out of it, and just smush this and soften it, just like that. Lightening this a little bit in the back there. Good. It's got a nice look to it. I'm gonna stop the recording here for a minute. When we come back, I'm gonna start to put some tone into the flowers and start to put in the shape of the stems inside the jar. But I'm gonna let this all dry. This layer is as far as I want to take it right now. And if I work anymore, I will end up making a mess, regretting that I kept working, like I'm already wishing I wasn't doing this right now, but what can you do? All right, I'll see you back here in a few minutes. Okay, we're back. Let's see. We are going to add some brown to our palette. I don't have my list of colors in front of me, and I don't use the earth tones a whole lot, so this looks like maybe a Van Dyke brown or a burnt sienna. I'm gonna start using this to also help delineate the shape of the inner section of the sunflowers. And it's not the darkest that the brown is going to be. It's the base layer of the brown. Everything is about starting with lighter shapes, bigger shapes, and building up. And while those shapes are drying, they're not really connected to anything, so I can work somewhere else. Make a little puddle of transparent orange. And add a little opera to it to pink it up a little bit. And we can start to put in the petals on our lily. And maybe have an orange and take some of that Dairylite yellow and mix that in. So we've got, again, a chance to shift around the color, warm and cool within the same structure, within the same layer. Anytime I'm doing a layer of wash, I try to look at ways that I can shift within a shape, do warm and cool to make it interesting later. It's just visually more fun to look at. But look at the lily. I'm not doing individual petals so much as the entire shape of the flower in this base color. And yes, I'm bouncing a little bit between warm and cool within the shapes, but beyond that, I'm really just getting the shape in correctly. Our lights are yellow, our greens, sorry. Our greens are still light enough that we can expand this shape if we need to. Change it if we need to. I like working in lighter layers first for the other reason that we still have room to make edits. You start too dark too early, all you can do is go darker and darker, and you end up making yourself stuck. Let's see, so we've got this petal shape. Now, while this is still wet, we can also take our wet brush, dry it off a little bit on some towel, some kitchen towel, and start to reserve. It's still wet enough we can do some lifting. Again, we're getting variety of value in here and defining that rolling shape of the lily. And I like the selection of colors I used within this because they do lift nicely. They are really pulling up okay. There is a little shadow cast here where that bends. I'm just going to put that in now, so we've got it. And a little bit of a shadow between those two shapes. All right, so now we've got the base of our lily in, and it looks really good from where I'm sitting. That's connected to the greens and to the yellows, so I want to let that dry. But I can come in and start to define the green shapes that are inside the bottle, that are all of our stems. And same thing, we're coming in with a light wash. And just remember that the water below the water line, or below the water line, it acts like a lens and magnifies it. So things aren't going to be in the exact same shape and place that they're in up above the water line. So you can kind of make a very basic shape here. It goes to there. And then continue it a little bit, but it also goes off in different ways. And this is the lightest. This is going to be, we're going to deepen up and make some separation by coming in with darker greens later, but that's the first move in there. And it's very light at this point compared to where it's going to end up, or at least parts of it. And I can take some of that cobalt teal that we used earlier and a little bit of lavender. And darken up this quadrant of the glass. And if it runs into that green shape we just made, that's fine because that's the lightest. We'll crisp up that edge when we come in with the darker green. Yeah, that this is a little bit lighter if I'm squinting at all that stuff. There's a little bit lighter move here, so I might as well just pull those out now while I can. All right, so what we're running into now is that the next thing that I want to work on is I'm gonna make up a little bit more of that cobalt teal color. Add a little bit of lavender to it and a little, just a chunk of green into it. It's still very transparent, you can't see it. Very transparent. I'm gonna re-emphasize the color that's projected through the jar onto the wall. I need to add some water to this because I want the bottle to be darker than this. But I want to see some of that tone into the shadow. And we can even add another layer to our shadow now. This is that neutral tint. It's that big bowl of neutral tint that I have mixed up right here, ready to go. And I'm starting to look at those shapes where it produces lighter shadows, and I'm leaving little swirls or indistinct shapes so that I can come in, and if I just add some water, I'll be left with a lighter spot as the light travels through the yellow flowers versus where it travels through the greens, where it gets hung up and causes a dark shadow from the greens. It actually is quite a bit lighter when it's coming through the yellow flowers. I can come right over here to where the wall is, and this light mark was accidental, but it's going to work really well for me as it kind of mimics that shape in there. And we'll come out a little bit more, and then we can start to just pull out with water here, because it gets softer and lighter as it gets out to the edge. And this may not be as dark as it's going to end up totally, but it's a pretty good start. Most importantly, we kept that beautiful glow that's the light passing through. The jar into the shadow. Excuse me. I even just tease that with a little bit more of that blue color up in that area. And then just wet this again. There we go. That shadow is going to get darker, and we're going to use that to push the mason jar forward. And I can start to make a slightly darker green. It's not slightly darker, it's quite a bit darker. And start to develop some of these shapes here. And just remember to leave little pockets of that early green shining through that we can use as possibly stems or just variations in the tone. We can actually make it look like leaves without trying to paint every single leaf. It's more about painting shapes of values. And I can work in this area here too. There's quite a bit of chaos that happens in here. It's not all dark, 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 although it's certainly dark underneath the sunflower. And we can use this green to help make the shapes. Just stick this right into here like that. I got a little bit carried away. I'm just gonna pull back a little bit there. And let's see. I use my knuckle of my pinky as a rest for my fingers. So I have to be careful about where if you're not comfortable about doing that, be very careful to maybe wait and don't do this part until after any work that you've done in the shadow has dried. See, I'm looking for big shapes at this point and darkening up and getting some, tuning up the value. This will help me when I come back in after this dries and I'm looking at the yellow and deciding how I want to treat the yellow, how much I want to darken that. This guy here is pretty dark, so let's darken him. And we got that one. This one in the front is kind of light, so I'll just paint right up to that one. A little bit of that. Okay. You can use broken line and dashes close to the top of the sunflower here to help define the sunflower and be the base of this. I think I decided it was goldenrod or whatever it is. Put a couple of dark dashes in there. Start to darken. This green is pretty far back, so I'm darkening this one quite a bit at this point. That pushes the lily forward. Same thing here. I'll start to put darker green underneath here. As you can see, it's starting to I can define that shape even more. Come right to my lily petal, like that, and into here. And we can just give it some dry brush and let it finish in there. I'm gonna let this dry. This is where we're gonna end video 2. When we come back, what we'll work on will be all of this dark that I've used to help surround my sunflowers and give me the ideas of my core shapes. Will be nice and dry. All right. Try to work back here with your brush. Try not to be holding it too much like a pencil. Just make sure you don't let anything run. But by getting darker with those greens, that lily is starting to jump out. I'm gonna let this dry, and then we'll start to add tone to the sunflowers, and we add tone to the sunflowers. We'll have our main values up on the top sort of worked out, and our shapes are really, really good and strong. We'll do a little spattering up there. We'll let that breathe for a while, and we'll focus down here in the jar, and again coming back into this shadow and coming in and darkening it up one more time. It's coming together. It looks really good. Hopefully this gives you some stuff to play with this week while I'm away, and I look forward to coming back and doing another video for you guys, and meeting you, for my live students, meeting you in class the next week. I think that's the 15th. So we're missing class on the 8th, and then we'll be back in the classroom on the 15th. So until then, happy painting.